was great to hear you guys sing during this time of worship. If you got a Bible, we're going to spend this evening in in Philippians chapter 2 is where we're going to be at tonight, and starting in verse 12. We looked last week at kind of at what it looked like of humility, and talked about Christ, and he lived a life of humility. He chose to take on flesh, dwell among us, and I encourage you, if you've missed that any weeks, to go back, listen. I believe you'll be encouraged as we've dove into a lot of different areas where sometimes it would feel like joy doesn't belong when we go through difficulties or suffering or heartache, moments where we feel like we should maybe be elevated, but instead we feel like, man, we just get beat down more and more. And so I encourage you, if you miss those, to go back and follow up on those. But as well tonight, as we get here and begin to consider this next section of Paul's writing in Philippians chapter 2, verse 12, he has, I think, a lot of profound things for us to say, for us to hear. And he said, to a church at a specific time, in a specific place, but also I believe holds great value to us as well too. And I am encouraged by Paul's words in the book of Philippians, and especially today. If you consider those maybe around you that have had influence in some ways, it's often different how we gain influence. But one of the people I was thinking about as I began to prepare for this message this evening and talked about is we're going to look at kind of how do we have joy as we shine Christ's light. One of the people I think about as shine Christ's light the most, not just through the things they say, but really the way they lived. And many of you may have heard the name Tim Tebow before. Does anybody know who that is? Yep, some of you probably love him and adore him. If you're a football fan of any kind, and especially a Florida fan, or maybe a pro football fan as well too. He won a Heisman Trophy. He was an NFL quarterback, also played professional baseball for a little while, and gave his shot at that. But a lot of things, I believe that even the thing that stood out to me more than anything with him is that even with all the talents, all the abilities, all the accolades and all that, it was really his joy to me that stood out. Joy for life, joy for the game, joy for those things around him and those people. You know, as he was a high-profile kind of athlete and quarterback for his career, and many probably thought that it ended way too soon. And but through that, you know, Tim could have the opportunity. He could have chosen to fade out and just kind of fade away and become bitter, maybe even that things didn't work out like he anticipated. But instead, he continued to persevere. He didn't get defeated. He didn't get bitter. But he kept showing up no matter what it was, with joy and with a smile. And whether it was with on the sidelines, maybe it was with praying with a child in the hospital, or even as he cares about children with special needs through his Night to Shine that maybe you've heard about. That's a specific thing just for children with special needs, a prom that they hold every year. One's held locally here at the Botanical Gardens, and as well they do it all over the country. But through that there's, I believe, one thing that I believe that his life says and lived loudly, that his joy ultimately wasn't rooted in his success, but instead it was rooted in Christ. And one of the things one time he said during one of the seasons that I believe stuck out to me was he said, "I don't know what my future holds, but I know who holds my future." And I believe that is truly joy in action. Not based on the outcomes, not based on our circumstances, but instead based on an identity that he had in Christ. And so tonight is, I want you to think about, if you ever maybe admired somebody greatly for their faith and the way they stayed positive and stayed joyful, even maybe when the plans didn't work out the way they expected. Maybe somebody you saw, man, they just lived a life of just joy no matter what. And it affected not just you, but maybe even other people. Like they saw, that you see the way they lived their life, and it affected you and it affected others around them. And tonight, I believe that's what Paul is wanting to say to us, you know, and we know what those moments are like. Listen, it's those people that when they the way they live and the way they act, it just affects others around us. Other people want to just be like them, or they're attracted to them because of who they are and the way they live. They don't just live like everybody else, but they live differently. And I believe we can tie those moments even to our own real life. You know, it's those times where our actions speak louder than what? Words, right? We've often heard about our kids more as what? Caught than taught. They watch our activities, they watch our actions, and we do as well too. If you're a parent, you know that, right? You know what it's like when that child says something or does something, and you have to get on to them. And then you begin to contemplate, why in the world did they do something like that? Why did they say something like that? And then you start taking that moment of introspection and you recognize they learned it from you. That's why they said that thing. That's why they did that thing. And we've probably all been there. If you're a parent tonight, some of you aren't yet, you may one day get that joy where all of a sudden you have to punish them, and then you're like, they're me. They're miniature me's is what they are running around here. They act just like me. They talk just like me because they've watched you to become them. And they become you because more is often, I believe, caught than taught. They watch our lives. They see our habits. They observe the small things. They see the actions and the way they live. And listen, we even see other people's that way too, right? And before we know, we see even sometimes when we hang out with certain people over long periods of time, all of a sudden we begin to look more like them, act more, maybe not look like them, but we start to sometimes even act like we're affected by them in certain different ways, because I believe not only can we be influenced in that way, we can also be influencers of. Because all of us, I believe, through the lives that we're living, are saying something. We may say things out of our lips every day, but if our actions aren't backing those things up, we'll be found out to eventually be a fraud. But when I believe our actions live out louder than our words, we can live a great impact. And that, I believe, is what Paul is wanting to get to today. And I believe he's inviting us into this same life, that we would live a life that shines so brightly that people can't help but be drawn to Jesus. That we would live in a manner, in a way that we would live that people couldn't help but go, man, I don't know what's about her. I don't know what it is with her. I don't know what it is with him. I'm not sure, but man, I know I want what they've got. And when we live in this way, not just by what we say, but what we do. Paul wrote in another portion in Corinthians where he said, listen, the kingdom is not a manner of things we say, but it's a manner of what we do. It's how we live our lives that speaks the message. It preaches the loudest sermon we will ever hear. It preaches the loudest sermon that anybody will ever hear from us is how we live. Because I believe every one of us in this room, we desire to make a difference. We want to be an influence, right? We desire to make an impact in some way, that we wouldn't just leave this earth without a sound, but we would make a true difference. That the people around us, they would say, man, he makes a difference. I'm so glad they're a part of my life. I'm so glad they're in my life. Every one of us, we want to live with purpose. And Paul challenges us to live with a purpose, to shine a light that's so much greater, that it makes a difference in the world. But my concern is that all too often we think that to truly shine our light means that somehow we've got to be loud or perfect. But Paul, he actually says, it's about living faithfully and joyfully in a dark world. Because newsflash, you're not perfect. Now, don't look at your spouse right now. Just stay at me. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Man, I mess up every day. I'm not a perfect pastor. I mess up all the time. I know that there's things I would go, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have said this. I wish, you know what? And we can go. But the reality is, to me, for us to shine, we're not going to be perfect. None of us are. Thank the Lord for Jesus. But we can be faithful. And we can choose joy. A joy that I believe is meant to be contagious to the world. And so if you got a Bible, I want you to grab it out. Philippians chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 12 this evening. And maybe you might want to write this down. A few key statements I just want to encourage you. The first one is work it out, not work for it. Work it out, not work for. And you may go, well, what in the world does that mean? Let's check out this first verse and see what it means. Philippians chapter 12. Dear friends, it says, you always followed my instructions when I was with you. And now that I'm away, it is even more important. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, obeying God with deep reverence and fear. One translation, the NIV translation, says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And see, Paul here, I want you to understand, I want you to know this tonight. Paul's not talking about earning your salvation, that we would work for it, but instead we would work it out. We would dig into it. We would become strong. Because it's only through working that we get stronger, right? It's only through working out we get in shape. And like my good friend Greg Johnson used to say, round is a shape, so I'm in shape. But the reality is, yeah, round's a shape, but it's not in shape, unfortunately, the way we consider it that way. But we work out our faith. We grow in our faith, and we do that through working with fear and trembling, because the reason I believe we need fear, we have reverence for the Lord of who He is, and we'd walk in obedience, because also in humility and reverence of who He is, because here's the reality. You know, I'm not sure, have you ever begin to read, and then you learned something later that went, oh, you know what? Maybe that wasn't right, what I thought it was. Or maybe I heard something, I grew up with a certain vernacular or a certain thing or a certain theology of faith, and the reality is we learned that, oh, that may not, we need to have enough humility to go, you know what? Maybe I don't know everything. But I would go with fear and trembling. Lord, I want to work this out. I need to get in my word. I need to walk in your word. I need to faithfully pursue you with all that I have. Because for us, he's talking about, listen, that we would live out of that salvation that we've received. That's where we work from. We don't work for our salvation. We work from our salvation. Because I have salvation, therefore I live a life to honor God. Therefore, because of that, I obey the Lord and His works and His truth. I show the world my salvation as I wrestle and work it out. God works in us, I believe, so that His light will shine through us. And then in verse 13, for God is working in you, giving you the desires and the power to do what pleases Him. That God, the good news is today, is that God, if you will surrender yourself to Him, if you will live for Him, you will work out your faith, continue to press into that. He as well is working in you. He's pressing into you. And just like sometimes a workout has anybody ever woke up after they worked out for the first time in a long time? Do you remember what that was like? You didn't want to get out of bed. It was painful. It hurt. Your joints hurt. Your muscles hurt. You get older, then you're like, just walking was a workout today, you know. There's all these things. And so there's moments where, God begins to work in us. And sometimes there can be painful moments. Sometimes there can be struggles. Sometimes there can be heartache. But He is working that for His good plan, for His good purpose, because His desire is that you would live and grow in Him. And He is giving us a desire, it says. and the power that we need to do the work that He's called us to. So today, I believe Paul would want to say to us, just as well as he said to that church, listen, you need to work out. Work out, dig into your faith, work into that with fear and trembling, with reverence for the Lord, and deep fear. But you would know you don't have to work for it, but you work from it. And that we would live that way. That tomorrow when we get up, we can have the joy of the Lord because we get to pursue Him. Not so that we get any more, because we already have all of Him we need. But instead we would grow in Him. And then as well, if we continue on, I want to remind you another thing, that we would all be shining. That we'd all shining and no grumbling. Anybody know any grumblers? You got any grumblers in your life, you know? They may live with you, I don't know. So we'll just pray for them too, okay? And you may be, if you don't have any, you may be the one. So just maybe pray about that too or whatever. Don't point at anybody right now. Pray for Jesus, okay? Oh, that was loud. We'll have marriage counseling afterwards. No, I'm just joking. I'm just playing. This is what it says in verse 14. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that no one can criticize you. Do everything without what? What? Complaining and arguing. Well, that'll hit home, right? Anybody complained about anything today? Last week? Last month? Last year? You still complaining about something that happened last year? You know? In those moments, I mean, right? Anybody arguing? Same argument. Anybody, you're with your spouse, you know, or a friend. You're still arguing about the same thing you were arguing about 14 years ago. You know? I mean, listen, yesterday, I'm at a baseball game, sitting there watching Joe play in 150-degree weather. And like literally the same old argument that happens all the time. You may not know this, and if you're not into sports, I'm sorry. You just have to bear with me for a moment. But literally the same argument that's been happening, I feel like since the dawn of time, is who's better, MJ or LeBron? You have to pray about it. I have one son. If you said anybody other than LeBron, he'll murder you. And so, and then I have others, you know, and we go there. And we can all, that argument's been going on since the beginning of time. There'll be other people that'll argue about music. What band's better than the other? What group's better than that? They argue. But yeah, it says, hey, do everything without. So in everything we're doing, we do it without arguing or complaining. That's not easy, is it? But the reason we do it is not so just we'll just be nice people, good citizens. Isn't it really hard to criticize somebody who never argues with you? It's really hard to criticize the person who never complains. Like when they're at stage 4 cancer and they still seem to have joy. And you want to be like, come on, dude. But they don't complain. They don't seem to argue. They don't seem there's just something different. Because God's been doing a work. And we need God to do a work in us as well too. The no grumbling, that we would live differently. Because I believe Paul is connecting our witness with our attitude. Do you know your attitude can affect your witness? If you want to be a witness for the Lord, do you think people go, man, I love it because every time I'm around him, he argues with me all the time? You know, I just really I want whatever they got because, man, every time, they complain more than anybody I know. They're my favorite person to be around. Those things don't compute, right? They don't work together. And Paul knows that. That's why he wants to get together, because he knows, listen, You want to be a witness for the Lord? You want to make a difference for God? You want to live for Him? You want to follow Him? You want to work from salvation, from that point of salvation and really make a difference? Don't argue and complain. Because then nobody can criticize you. So I challenge you to consider tomorrow, maybe when you go to work, maybe when you wake up, maybe tonight when you get home, whenever it may be. Just see. Watch yourself and just evaluate. Am I argumentative? Maybe even ask your family. Do I tend to complain a lot? You may not want to hear it, so you may not be ready for it. You may need to wait, maybe a little tender today, maybe ask tomorrow, But that you just take a moment and step back and really consider, wow, what about your coworkers? Say, hey, do I tend to come off complaining to you a lot? Or argue? Am I that, when I'm around the office, do people think I'm argumentative? And I don't mean we just got to go along, get along, and everything. Sorry, I think we can challenge the process. I think we can make it different. I think we can push back against the status quo. But just in the way we live our lives, what do we look like? What does the world see? And I believe Paul knew, hey, you want to make a difference. It starts in our attitudes. The things we do, the way we speak, the way we complain. It says this, and we continue on in the second part of verse 15. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and a perverse people. Our world, I believe, is saturated with cynicism and complaining. I would say that 1 out of every 4, if not more, posts online are what? Complain about something. It's too hot today. It's too cold today. It's raining today. Whatever it may be. This person cut me off in traffic. I didn't like the way this person looked at me and talked to me. I didn't, that's the deal, right? And the only difference is everybody else just didn't say it out loud. We just put it out there, whatever. But yet, we're supposed to live clean. To live lives of purity. Innocent as children of God. Because what I know is, listen, joyful obedience stands out. That when people see you, when they see us, because listen, living clean isn't normal. The world says what? Satisfy you. Do whatever's good for you. Join into what we've got. But to live clean is to live differently. That we would live as obedient children of God, shining like bright lights. Or as the NIV says, that we would shine like stars. That we would shine like stars. I want us and I want you to be a star. And I don't mean a star of a Broadway play, a star of the show, a star athlete, a star musician, but literally be a human-like star that lights up everywhere. One of my favorite things is when the night sky is dark and there's no clouds in the sky. And you look up and you can see the stars. You can see the Big Dipper. There's something amazing about that we're captured by. I tried to find this picture. There was one time Caleb had gotten a new telescope. I didn't tell him I was going to tell this story. But we got this telescope, and we were looking up at the stars and the moon through this telescope, and there's this picture because it was really cold outside. And he has this huge monstrosity of a jacket at the time. He was much smaller. It was my jacket. But I have this picture, and it's him standing next to the telescope, but looking straight up in the air. And the wonder as we looked at the stars. And I believe, listen, as followers of Jesus, I believe people are looking for the stars. And the question is, will we shine? I believe they're looking for people that are going to live clean, that are going to live as innocent as the children of God, and that'll shine like stars. Because here's what I know. When it's darkest, the stars shine the brightest. And I think we could all agree that oftentimes it feels like our world is pretty dark. Then that should mean it's the greatest time for us to shine the brightest. And will we be people that shine out, that make a difference? One of my favorite things I remember as a kid we would get, it seemed always around Halloween. I don't know what it was about Halloween, but we'd always get glow sticks. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And the one thing you know, and this is what I want you to know, is sometimes when we live clean, sometimes we live in this way, and God begins to work in our lives, sometimes it's not always easy. And shining our light is not always easy either, because there's so many things competing for our attention. For our kids in this room, man, I pray for you every day that your hearts will remain innocent and that your lives will remain pure so that you can shine like stars. But the thing I remember always about the glow stick, do you remember what you had to do? You didn't just shake it. You had to what? You had to break it. And then even shake it. And after it was broken and shaken, it would shine. And sometimes I believe it's through our greatest moments of breaking and shaking in our lives that God shines the brightest. For many of us, we've been through breaking. For some of you, you sit right now and you're shaken. But I can promise you the Lord can use you. If you're surrendered and submitted to Him, I believe He will use you to shine a light that the world needs to see. And it may not always be easy, because the breaking never is. The shaking never is. But I promise it's in those moments often we shine the brightest when we live for Him. And will we be those people that shine the brightest? And I believe it's going to take an activity that's not always easy, because it's going to mean us opening ourselves up to things that the Lord may be wanting to do. And sometimes we're going to be drawn to compromise or to choose a different way or to choose another path. But we need to be reminded, I believe, of what Paul said next, that we would hold firm to the Word. That you and I would hold firm to the Word, because there will be a day where we are shaken, where we are broken. And we need the Word to remind us of God's truth to us. That He will never leave us. That He will never forsake us. That His yoke is easy and His burden is light. So take my yoke, it says, upon you today. That when you feel most burdened, He is with you. And Paul said in verse 16, hold firmly to the word of life. Then on the day of the return, I will be proud that I did not run a race in vain and that my work was not useless. Because listen, I don't think he's just saying, listen, don't just shine in general, but shine with the word of life in your hands. That we would hold out this word, that we would hold on to it tightly, that we would hide, as it says in Scripture, the words in our heart, that we may not sin against God. That we would hide the word in our heart. Because the word is our light. Do you remember what it said about the word? It's a lamp to our feet, a light to our path. That we would hold on to the word today. That we would allow it to overwhelm. And I believe it's as we do that, Because there will be days when it'll be dark. There will be days when we feel broken. There will be days when we're overwhelmed. There will be days when we don't want to shine because we're tired of trying to shine a light. But if we'll hold on to the word of truth that says every word of this book will not return void. And Paul said this in verse 17. But I rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God, just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share that joy. Yes, you should rejoice, and I will share your joy. Paul's joy is knowing that the Philippians' obedience and faithfulness proves that his efforts were not in vain. And that they should as well experience the same joy that Paul feels knowing that they lived a life full of faithful service to the Lord. That just as his life is being poured out as an offering, and as they pour out daily in their life, faithfully living out, faithfully serving others, faithfully serving the Lord, that they will live that life, that it'll be like an offering to the Lord. And they would rejoice in the work that God is doing in them. That we would hold firm to the Word, knowing it and doing what it says. That I believe we can make the greatest impact. And that tonight we would know joy isn't about easy, but it's about an eternal impact. It's about the opportunity that when we shine the light, when we hold on to the truth, when we do everything without complaining or grumbling, it gives us an opportunity to shine a light for Jesus. It just might change somebody's life forever. And our joy, I believe, comes from knowing that our lives were spent living and shining for the Lord. And so, for us maybe practically this evening, what does that look like? How do we live that out? The first way, we may need to check our attitude tonight. Are you complaining more than you're praising? Are you complaining more than you're praising the Lord? Have you chosen? Would you make a choice this week? Have you chosen in your life to shine the light, maybe at work, with your family, as you parented, online, and as well in your neighborhood? How do you need to shine your light this week? And then as well, would you consider and let God work through you? Maybe to ask God, God, how can your light shine through me today? How might your light shine through me? And just as the old song that when we were all little kids, if you grew up in church, that we all sang because we thought it was just a little kid's song. And you may remember it, you may know it, but maybe you didn't grow up in church and you don't know it. It's okay. You're not a second-class citizen today. I want you to know that. You just get to know it today. But you remember the song that we sang when we were little kids? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And of course we would keep going. Don't let Satan it out. We go through the whole thing. You remember it, right? Some of y'all remember it. If you missed it, come up later. Debbie will tell you all about it. And so she'll teach you the hand motions and everything. But that's the truth. We have a light within us. If we know Jesus, we have a light, and we are called to shine the light. And this is one of my favorite verses, that we would shine like stars to a dark world. That we would be people that would shine, because could you imagine what it would look like to be a church full of people committed to reflecting Jesus in every area, in every walk of our lives? Could you imagine what might happen in our homes, what might happen in our neighborhoods, what might happen in our state and city, and then even in our world, if we chose to live lives that shined for the Lord? So like stars in the sky, each one small alone, but together are powerful, that I believe we can make a difference. And I pray that this week you will choose, because it is a choice, to be the light bearer wherever you go. Wherever you go, you would consider, how can I shine the light of Christ here? So tonight, as we close our time together and get ready to sing a song of response, maybe the Lord has been stirring in your heart in some different ways, and we want to encourage you to seek Him and be obedient, as Paul even talked about, that we be obedient to the Lord to take that next step that maybe we feel like He's calling us to. But maybe that you would just reflect on a couple things that I want you to consider. Where in your life do you need to shine the light more intentionally? Where in your life do you need to shine it more intentionally? What's one area maybe this week that you can think, man, if I just be more intentional about shining it there, because man, it's really hard to shine it there maybe even. And I don't know where that is for you. All of us are in different places. All of us have different situations. But what would it look like if you just evaluated that tonight? Where do you need to be more intentional about shining a light? And then maybe you would even take it a step further. And who in your life needs to see Jesus in you this week? Who in your life needs to see Jesus in you this week? Could be a neighbor, could be a coworker, could be a friend, could be a child, it could be family, it could be somebody around your work. I don't know. But you just consider for the next few moments as we worship about the God who created the world and who's one day going to come back. That we don't have to wait to experience joy when He comes, but we can experience joy right now as we faithfully live a life, as Paul said, as an offering to the Lord. That we live that way. But in these moments we would consider, where do I need to be more intentional about shining a light? And who in my life needs to see the light?